Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's View Show here on the Big Blue View YouTube channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. All right, one of my favorite things that I did last year in the run up to the NFL draft was, you guys know that I do weekly mock drafts at Big Blue View, multi-round Giants mock drafts. One of my favorite things that I did was have Chad Reuter of NFL.com, who does a lot of his own multi-round mock drafts and probably hears all the criticism for them. I had Chad come on and sort of grade my own mock. So we're going to reprise that this year. Chad has come back on the show, and we're going to look at my most recent mock draft. So Chad, thank you very, very much for the time.
Yeah, you bet. It's always fun to talk about this stuff.
And I've got all of my protective gear around here for when you start throwing barbs at me for the picks that I made. So, and I can dive under the desk. So
Yeah,
we're good.
you could put the armor away. Actually, you're going to be very pleased about what I have to say.
All right, so let's get started. In my most recent mock draft, folks that have read it at Big Blue View know that this particular week I used the newly rolled out ESPN draft simulator. And, you know, simulators always have their quirks. This one drove me crazy because of the way that it structured the first 5 picks. But I ended up at number 6 for the Giants with Drake May, quarterback from North Carolina. And my quick opinion on that was, there's no chance the Giants let him pass if May is there. Chad, just I'll let you take it away with your thoughts on that choice.
Yeah, I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any doubt he would be the pick if he's available. He or JJ McCarthy, whichever quarterback is on there. They can't go with Daniel Jones again this year. They can't trust him to come back. So he's one of those two guys is going to be the pick. May is the obvious, pick, or the best fit for them with their, as you mentioned in the mock, their experience with Josh Allen. So no notes, and actually I think they might trade up either to 4 or 5 to get one of those guys. So I think that makes sense.
I was going to ask you about that. Given your choice, or given the Giants' choice between the two, do you think they would take either but prefer May if they could get him?
Yeah, that's what I would think.
I think that's it. It might be the bigger swing in terms of volatility, in terms of chance for success or failure. But when you look at it, to me, the ceiling is higher. So I think
Yeah,
that.
I think you're coming off a guy in Daniel Jones where you said the same thing, and so they may be thrilled to have McCarthy because you know what you're going to get with him. And so I think, but my guess is that they would see a lot of Allen in May and think that they could, take advantage of those skills. But
Sure, I think Dable would think he did it once with a guy that was spoken about very similarly, and
yeah,
could probably do it again.
yep.
All right, so Chad, let's move to round 2. In round 2, the Giants, at one point in time they had 2 picks in round 2. They traded the 39th pick to go get Brian Burns, which I don't think anyone should complain about.
No.
In my scenario here, because the Giants only had 6 picks entering the draft, I traded down from 47 to 57 with Tampa Bay, added the 89th overall pick, and at 57, I end up taking Troy Franklin, the wide receiver out of Oregon. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go, and probably a lot of different wide receivers you could pick here. Just your thoughts.
Yeah, Franklin's a good pick there. All the other players you listed there were good. Late second round value if they're available. Like a guy like Cam Hart could probably go in the top 50, but if he's available, he'd be a good pick. I'm the simulator saying Nix is available. I don't think that's realistic. If he falls out of the first round, he's going to be picked in the first. Somebody will trade up and get him. So
I'm with you. I think all 6 of those guys are going to wind up in the first round, all 6 of those quarterbacks, because teams like the Raiders and the Broncos and whoever, maybe the Buccaneers, if they want a quarterback, they're all going to get antsy.
Yeah, I think Penix has a shot of not going in the first round just because of the injury history, but he won't last very long in the second round, I wouldn't think. If he is available.
I'm just curious before we move off of that pick. I have Malachi Corley, the wide receiver, as one of my other players considered. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious for your thoughts on Corley as an NFL player. I just look at him and I think he's a guy that Daboll and Kafka would enjoy, just sort of figuring out ways to put the ball in his hands.
Yeah, that's what he is. Similar, he's probably a late second, early third round version of Deebo Samuel, in terms of a guy that can do a little bit of everything, and maybe not as explosive as Samuel, but certainly tough after the catch. My goodness. So yeah, I think he's going to go right in that top 75 kind of guy.
All right, and then I went to round 3. I took the running back out of Florida State. I took Trey Benson. Part of the reason I did that, the Giants have been connected to Benson a good bit lately. I think after moving on from Saquon Barkley, they signed Devin Singletary. Singletary's not the bell cow that Barkley was. He's also probably more of a short-term answer than a long-term answer. So I think they have to supplement that room. What do you think? Is this good value for Benson? Is there someone else you prefer here in this spot?
No, I think it's good value. That's approximately where I have him going, maybe a little earlier. If they look at running backs, you've got Will Shipley if you want more of a dual threat kind of guy. Marshawn Lloyd from USC, and who knows where Jalen Wright from Tennessee is going to go. Usually a guy like that would go in the second round and very possibly could go in the second round. But if he's available, they could pick him up. There's a lot of options for it. They'll be, if they decide to go there. Now, I personally wait a little bit later on my 7-round mock draft that comes out on Friday. I might have them waiting a little bit longer to get like more of a value in the 5th, 6th round, like Isaac Guerrero out of Louisville, something like that. But certainly, the value in the 3rd round is going to be good for them if they want to get it back there. So you can't blame them for that.
Before we move off the running back topic, you mentioned Will Shipley, and I happen to love the Will Shipley value for the Giants and just the style of play. Because a Daboll offense, what he always ran in Buffalo, and I think what he wants to run in New York isn't a pound it and hand the ball to the running back 20 times. He wants those guys to be complementary runners. He wants to be able to throw them the football. Mm-hmm. I think Will Shipley's a great fit. I think a guy like Dylan Lobe out of New Hampshire, maybe later on at some point, is a great fit. And even the Vidal kid out of Troy as a late round kind of flyer. Just those players better than I do. So just your thoughts on some of those guys.
Well, yeah, I think Lobe is definitely a guy, that early day 3 guy that a lot of teams are going to be looking for. Blake Watson out of Memphis is another one who's a really good dual threat guy. So those would be the 2. I think Shipley will probably go on day 2, but among those guys in that I'd say Lobe and Blake Watson would be the guys that you'd want to look at if you want that. And so that would be my kind of take.
Yeah, and I do think Shipley's a guy that, if it's the right spot, I think Shipley would be a terrific pick for the Giants as well. Mm-hmm. All right, let's look at what do we got here? Pick number 89. The additional pick that I got in my 2nd round trade down, I ended up taking Brandon Dorlus, the defensive tackle out of Oregon. I don't know if he's going to last this long, but I
Yeah.
do feel like the Giants need at some point in time in this draft to supplement that defensive line.
Yeah.
They traded away Leonard Williams last year. They lost Ashawn Robinson in free agency. They added I can't remember the guy's name, the defensive tackle from the Bills the other day in free agency, but I feel like it's a spot they need to supplement.
Yeah, for sure. And Doris, I think, will go a little bit earlier. But you never know. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
guys like that. He's sort of a tweener guy, and sometimes those guys last a little bit longer. I have him going in the early part of the third, but he's a good player. He would fit them well. I have them taking Justin Boygby from Alabama, like in the fifth,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of fill that similar role. So we're on the same page there. But yeah, I like they picked Jordan Phillips. That's what I was trying to figure out who
I couldn't
Yeah,
remember the first name, and I didn't want to start opening all kinds of windows and go try to find it.
Yeah.
You know?
So yeah, I think Dorless. And among your other picks, I think on there, you had Zach Zinter in the third round, and I think he's going to be a round two
Do you?
guy. Even coming off the injury, yeah. So
It's
I think he would be a round two guy. And then Dominic Puny, I think, is a day three guy. I know a lot of guys like him a little higher. Maybe he goes higher, but I don't think he's a special athlete, and he's probably a better as a day three kind of pick.
it's so interesting when you use these simulators because, as I said at the top, they all have their quirks,
Yeah,
and they're all built based off of big boards with different analysts putting information
yeah,
in. And that's kind of one of the reasons for jumping around, I think, and using different big
different
boards
ones.
just to see how different analysts you rate certain players. Because I could use the same big board or the same
Yeah,
simulator every week, and you wind up with the same mock draft.
right,
So
right.
it just I kind of agree with you that in some places where some of these guys showed up isn't where I would have expected them to show up. And that kind of leads me to the next pick here,
Yeah.
Chad. In round 4, pick 107, I have the Giants taking Christian Mahogany, the
Mhm.
guard out of Boston College. And I have to be honest with you, there's no way that I think Mahogany's going to be there. One of the other guys I considered is Ben Sano, the tight end out of Kansas State. I don't think
Uh-huh.
he's going to be there either.
No, I have Sano as a second round guy. I think Mahogany could be available in round 4. But he could go in round 3 as well. I don't, it's really the value of guys from 80 to 120 is more or less the same. So he could be a third round pick, but he could be a fourth round pick too. And he would be the guy that if the Giants wanted to get there. Another guy that's interesting for the Giants, if you want a guy who can play outside and inside, would be Satoa Lamea from Utah. He would be a good pick in that fourth round area because he could play some right tackle if you need him to, as well. And he was going to be looked at in that fourth round area. But Mahogany is not a dominant player. He's a good player, not a dominant player. So he could end up a mid fourth round pick. So yeah, I think that's reasonable value
Mhm.
for him. My pick in the fourth round is going to be Kyrie Jackson. I think the corner out of Oregon, and I think he'll be in that fourth round mix. But Sano, I love. He's
Mhm.
a top 50 guy for me. He could be like Sam Laporta as a rookie, honestly, and so I think he would be. And the other guys that you had, Yale kid and Andrew Phillips, probably third round guys as well. So,
Yeah,
but this is why we like the draft because we don't know,
right.
and sometimes guys fall a little further than we think. So
Mhm.
that's why we give them great grades is getting good value in round 4.
And it's so interesting. Every time I do one of these, you wind up looking at a somewhat different group of players. You mentioned the Kyrie Jackson kid, and I, these players better than I do. You study them in a greater depth than I do. But when I watched the kid, I'm like, I like this kid. He's got size. He's got some physical
Mm-hmm.
traits to work with. to me, he seems like the kind of corner that you draft on day 3 if he's there, late third, early fourth, whatever you draft on, and think, there's some tools here. Maybe I can develop this into something.
Yeah, I mean, he's very much like Tariq Woolen, who came out in Seattle, got him in the 5th round, I think, which was a surprise to me that he lasted that long. So kind of similar to that, I think he could really become something.
And we'll go to my 5th round pick, Giants at 166 in round 5. I took MJ Devonshire, cornerback out of Pittsburgh. Yep. And as I said in my mock, I looked at the list of players that were kind of sitting here, and I was like, yeah, there's just not much here that really thrills me at this point in the draft. And admittedly, I don't study, 350 players.
What, you have a life? What? You have a actual life?
A little bit of a life, grandchildren, and probably 6 or 8 posts a day to write. So, so a little bit of a life.
And history tells us that outside the top 150, 160, the odds of getting a great player are pretty small. So, but Devonshire is the guy that he is the corner in that round of the draft that I would have taken. So, I think that's a perfectly reasonable. And Jalix Hunt was the guy that you listed as after. I think he's a 3rd, probably, maybe early 4th. I really like him as an edge rush, potential edge, really good edge rusher. And then the guy that I would say if they wanted an edge, let's just say instead in round 5, I like Sonny Anderson out of Grambling. A little undervalued, I think, right now, but really a really interesting prospect with the length and the athleticism that you'd want. So just a name for Giants fans if they're looking for an edge in round 5 or 6.
And it's interesting because we're kind of circling around the same areas, the same positions. And I took the last pick for the Giants, round 6, number 183. And before I even get into that, a memo to Joe Shane. Please, God, Joe, please do not pick up any 7th round picks. Don't trade for any 7th round picks. I'll be very happy to be done at pick 183 and not have to spend 3 or 4 more hours waiting for Mr. Irrelevant. Please just don't pick up any picks after that. Make my Saturday a lot easier.
Spend your time working on those undrafted guys and trying to get them on board during the last part of the draft, right? You might as well.
Exactly. Make the media's life easier. Don't trade for any picks after 183. We'll all love you for that.
Yeah, I like Javon Solomon out of Troy. Again, I have him in my 7th round mock. I have him going if the next pick or the 2 picks after, something like that. So right in that same area. I also like Josh Newton from TCU as a corner. He was valued higher coming into the year, but he gave up some scores. He didn't look great, didn't work out great, but he is one of those guys that's competitive. He won't back down from any receiver, and if you get him on day 3, he could really surprise you and make the roster and be a decent corner. So I think that's a good guy to pick out as a 6th rounder.
It's one of those things too. I just want your thought on these guys on day 3. People get all upset. Oh, they wasted a day 3 pick. They wasted a 5th round pick. That 5th round pick is a bust. This and that. I'm sorry. I don't think there's ever been a day 3 pick who you can actually consider to be a bust. These guys are all flyers. They're all flyers. You're taking a chance based on a trade or 2, but none of them are perfect players.
No, you're just looking for that one thing that they have that you think you can work with. And I think once you get outside the top 15 or 20 picks in round 4, you really, guys have a 30 or 40% chance at the best to become a starter. And a lot of them end up being special teams players and stuff like that. And occasionally you get a guy that works himself into a really good And once every 100 years you get Tom Brady, but that doesn't happen. I mean, sometimes you get a starter and there are positions, for example, a lot of guards and centers come out of round 6 and 7, so teams will wait and try to get that guy that can maybe fill that void. Maybe an off the ball linebacker. There's some spots where you can get guys that contribute more. But overall, I wouldn't say it's wasting. But on the other hand, I wouldn't say like I get your point about not wanting seventh round picks. But look, if you can move down 3 spots in the fifth round and get a sixth and seventh, or maybe even like a 2025 fifth rounder and a seventh this year, then you got to take it. And because the more chances you get, you do get a better chance of hitting on one of these guys. But when fans say it's a bust, you're not a bust if you're a day 3 pick. It just it's not the word to use.
No, and you talked about 30 or 40%, and at Big Blue View recently, I've been charting quarterbacks, for example, since 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And the hit rate on first round picks at quarterback, even since 2010. I mean, if you talk about, I categorized it as solid starter or above.
Yeah.
That's only, I think it was something that Bill Barnwell actually put out,
Mm-hmm.
how he would categorize them. And I had been kind of struggling to categorize how I wanted to grade them. And I thought, oh, I like that. So I used it, and it comes out to 38%.
Yeah.
38% success rate in the first round. What I'd be curious about is how that compares to the overall success rate of guys that are drafted, because it's not an exact science in any way,
No.
shape, or form.
No. I mean, I think there's some positions where you get to more like 50 and 60%, and it's more difficult for guys like offensive linemen. How do you judge success? At least with quarterbacks, you can pretty much tell if a guy's doing his job or not. But with offensive line, it's more difficult. But I mean, overall, in the first round, if you're doing better than 50 to 60%, you're doing pretty well as a general manager. And there's a lot of factors involved in that. Injuries. A guy gets drafted, and then a year later, a new coach comes in, and he isn't the same fit. So it's not all about the player either. And so it's just difficult to have more of a hit rate than that. And of course, on day 3, a lot of the seventh rounders don't make the squad. They end up on a practice squad, maybe. And it's difficult. So, like I said, once you're out of the fifth round, it's really a crapshoot. Sometimes on occasion you get a hit. Most of the time, it's a guy that fills in the back end of the roster.
Yeah, just real quickly, you talk about coaching changes. People ask me all the time, why can't the Giants ever get the offensive line right? And the thing that I keep coming back to is, you make mistakes once in a while, but the other part of it is, when you're changing the head coach every year, when you're every 2 years, when you're changing the offensive coordinator every year or 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
when you're changing the offensive line coach every year or two, that guy you drafted last year isn't nearly as valuable anymore, because he doesn't fit the offense the way you want him to. He doesn't have the skill set you want. So lack of continuity leads to lack of ability to develop anything.
Yeah, and then if you keep a guy for too long, then everybody complains, why are you keeping this coach for 4 or 5 years when he's not winning, right? It's
Right.
like a no win situation. But the magic happens when everything comes into place. You have the scouts and the coaches all on the same page. You get the players make the plays they're supposed to. There's no injuries. A lot has to happen for a really successful franchise to maintain that kind of success over any sort of time. So it's difficult. It's a difficult business to be in. It's a difficult game to be successful in, and But on the other hand, if the ups and downs make it interesting, and if the same teams won all the time, it gets a little boring. So that's a great thing about the league. The amount of teams that can go from worst to first, and then the teams that have been worse, when they succeed, it's really exciting for those guys. So like most of life, the ups and downs make it interesting, and that's one of the things I love. Why I started following the draft like 25 years ago is the hope that it gives fans that your team will improve with these new players.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a great part of following the sport.
I always tell Giants fans who have complained a lot over the last decade, you still have 4 Lombardi trophies sitting in the Giants building. There's a whole lot of NFL fan bases
That's
that would
right.
trade places with you in a heartbeat.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
The one upstate being probably the biggest one.
And the co-tenant at MetLife as well.
That's true. True.
All right. Chad, I appreciate it. I always enjoy this. You made me feel smarter about my choices. You made me feel a
Yeah,
lot
did a
better.
good job.
So, all
Yep.
right. Appreciate it. And when's your next mock, your last mock coming out?
Friday.
Friday.
7-round mock on Friday. And
Cool.
yeah.
All
Sure.
right. All right, Giants fans, check that one out. Feel free to gnash your teeth and comment and complain about that, and leave me alone for a couple days.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I appreciate the fervor that people have about this stuff and all that, but in the end, you just got to follow your heart, follow where your process takes you, and hopefully, I've come up with some things that other people aren't talking about to make it interesting, but are plausible. And
Mhm.
because I certainly don't want to put out the same stuff everybody else does, so
Awesome.
hopefully, a few things come through, and we'll have fun with it.
All right, Chad, thank you very, very much for the time. Giants fans, please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.